And I do appreciate you joining me in conversation. Now, I'm going to give you in just a second an opportunity to introduce yourself. But just to those who are new to my vlog, this is really a veteran story. And of course, I'm the veteran here. I am a veteran, U.S. Marine combat veteran, suffers with PTSD. I have psychosis, made 5 suicide attempts, and I'm still alive. On top of all that, in 2022, and I realize we're several years past that, I also had a heart attack. So life keeps on
Yeah.
circling back around and saying,
Mm,
my time on Earth may be limited, so I got to make the best use of it as I can.
mhm,
With that being as it is, like I said earlier, suicide kind of has reframed my life. So
mm.
before we even begin to get into that conversation, because I know that's near and dear to your heart,
Yeah.
tell our listeners, tell our watchers who you are and what you do.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I always, you know me, I will have any conversation you want to have because I just respect you so much and admire the mission that you're on. I'm Suzanne Jabor. I'm in Vancouver, Canada, and I'm a grieving mom. And out of that journey, have become a grief coach, an educator, speaker, author, all of the things. Anywhere I can be pushing this conversation about grief and about yes, particularly, and I love that you're creating this space, but particularly the grief that comes after a death by suicide. It's a different thing because of all of I think, because of all of the societal weirdness that we have around deaths that are due to mental illness. Because I actually choose to say that my son Ben died of a terminal case of depression and anxiety because the means of his death isn't all that helpful. The thing we need to fix is our system of care around mental illness and our understanding that sometimes, no matter what you do and no matter the resources, it's a terminal illness.
Mm.
And that's the reality. So yeah, I'm so excited to be able to have this conversation and to be able to just open this space of maybe thinking about this in a more expansive way. Because right now, our thinking about deaths by suicide, about mental health, as you know, as someone who's living and walking that path, are actually really harmful. And
Mm.
our lack, both, certainly in Canada, and I know it's the same in the US, our lack of access to support is really criminal because the inability to get support, the wildly unsatisfying results that many people get with medications that are deemed kind of good enough,
Hmm.
it's not good enough and we need to do better. And by having these conversations and talking about, first of all, how do we support people when they're here? And then how do we rebuild our lives and recover if their illness turns out to be terminal is a conversation we need to be having more. So I'm just thrilled to be here having a piece of it with you today from our two different perspectives.
What I do appreciate that. And so kind of given some context here, um, I have been recently diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, I've been living
Hmm.
with this condition for
Hmm.
20 plus years. And so, like I said, I was a Marine back in the day, and we're talking about late 80s and early 90s, 1990s. Um,
Yeah.
and I have been living with the symptomology in pieces. And so, meaning that I would have something come up. I have frequent nightmares. I've had psychosis, and it's kind of complex. And I've had all these different experiences, but they've always been, for me, they've been siloed. And so, meaning that I would experience
Mm.
something and consider it, I would just have to deal with it at its time and
Yep.
then move on with life. And that's been consistently my story up until about 2021 when I, made my fifth suicide attempt. And for whatever reason, and of course, my daughter is now 15, and so this was 4 years ago. For whatever reason, I wanted things to be different with me. And I
Mm.
didn't know how to do that. All I knew at the time was the one thing that was missing was connections with other human beings, with other people, having
Hmm.
those really deep,
Hmm.
meaningful, valuable friendships, whatever that is. And so I've been doing that. I've been actually making new friends and colleagues, for the past 4 years. And that's been part of it. But the other part of that for me to kind of help me deal with all that stuff has it's been my need to get out there, be in nature,
Mm,
exercise, and
yep.
kind of just rebuild my system. But one of the questions that was asked of me, and that this is going back to my conversation with Carol Bannon's, was, and this was
Hmm.
off record, and so I kind of want to bring this on record, but have it with you because you are the ripple effect of a death by suicide.
Hmm. Yep.
When Carol asked me, you know, did anything else on the outside of your world, of my person, um, would that have changed the decision to attempt suicide? And I said no. I said straight up in front, no. Because the suicide is in here. The frustration, the
Hmm.
fear, the doubt, the anger, and all those complex emotions are all inside. They have nothing to do with anything that's out here. So nobody else was going to save me, even
No.
if I asked them to.
Yep.
I had to make the decision. I had to live with it. And so, can you just share your story real quickly so that others can appreciate where you're coming from?
Yeah, I love that answer because I think one of the things that happens the most as a ripple effect of a death by suicide for the people left behind is so often we feel judged because, that suicide awareness stuff will come out. And I'm all about suicide awareness. Yes, can we please talk about this? Can we please talk about how we resource people appropriately, how we make sure they have deep connections? But that list of like the 10 things you should be doing to make sure your friend doesn't die by suicide, it's just not it. It's not it. Because, I remember having this conversation with one of Ben's best friends after he had died, and she was so wounded as someone who was left behind. It makes me so emotional. She was so wounded by that list because it felt like somehow she had failed him because she was doing everything on the list. Everybody was.
Mhm.
Everyone was reaching out. We were all, Ben died during all of the chaos that was September of 2020. So the George Floyd murders had happened. The world was literally on fire, like wildfires unprecedented at the time. All these protests, all the civil rights movement stuff happening. There was a lot happening. And people were reaching out and trying to be connected and doing everything we knew how. And even though we were doing everything on that list, as you so brilliantly said, the demons were Ben's inside.
Mhm.
And I take great comfort in knowing that I am 100% sure that he knows he was loved and that he knows that we all knew that he loved us. And
Mhm.
if that was enough, he would still be here. But it's not enough.
Mhm.
So, yes, by all means, all the things on that list, be reaching out, be making sure people are okay, be creating spaces to have real conversations about what's happening for us. Do all the things, absolutely, because for many people, that will make a big difference. And for some people, for that small percentage of all of the people that have mental illness and mental health challenges, for a small percentage, that disease will turn out to be terminal. And I am not, I don't have the power to change that decision for someone else.
Mhm.
I can do all kinds of other things, but there's no like if Ben had died from cancer, no one would judge how I had supported him during his cancer journey or if I had done enough. But because he died of poor mental health, there's a judgment about how the people around him must have let him down or something or other. And whether that's ever articulated, which it generally isn't, it's a weird subtext in that space that either he should have been able to just like pull up his socks and get it together, which is, as you well know, not how mental health works. Or the people around him should have been able to do something or other. I'm not sure what magic wand I didn't wave, right? But that there should have been something we could do. And that's just not the reality. And we do a disservice to the people left behind, experiencing, as you've named it, that ripple by expecting that there was something they should have been able to do. And I was really blessed to have a conversation out of a whole, I ended up having a fight with the coroner's office. And out of my battle with the coroner's office, I ended up having the opportunity to have a conversation with Ben's psychologist that worked with us when he was a child, because he had struggled with poor mental health from when he was about 9 or 10. And so I had a conversation with her because she was approached by the coroner's office to say, hey, can you send us your files on this patient? And so I had that opportunity to speak to a professional who understands mental health. And I said to her, like, I don't feel that guilt that people say is so common and normal, because I know, I am 100% sure, as his mom and as part of his support system, I did everything that we could. We did all the things. And she said, oh, yeah, like you as a family, as a community, did everything. And sometimes that's just not enough. And that has to be okay. It has to be okay that sometimes the disease is terminal, just like with every other disease.
That's a good point. So let's move this conversation forward just an inch or so,
Hmm.
meaning that that ripple effect itself changed everything about you and how you
Yeah.
approach life. So I want you to think
Yeah.
about
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
before you answer the question. The
Yeah.
value here is helping people who are facing that same situation and watching this
Yeah.
conversation and who are stuck in that shame, guilt, fear because they're the
Yeah.
one left behind. What can you tell them? What would you want to tell them?
When I did my grief educator training with David Kessler, he was the first person I heard say it, and I've heard other people say it since. But he has a way of explaining it where he says, "You didn't cause it; they couldn't cure it, and you couldn't control it." And there was
Say it,
something about
say,
that.
say it again, please.
Yeah, you didn't cause it; they couldn't cure it, and you couldn't control it. And there was something about that for me, that understanding that, you know what, this is an illness that happened to my child. I didn't cause it. I was not the source of this illness, right? The system, the medical professionals, all of the, interventions that could have happened couldn't cure it, and none of us could control it. I don't have that power. And as a survivor, as someone who's carrying that ripple after a death by suicide, I think we really want to, I don't even think, I know, as the survivor, as the person left behind, we would literally give anything to have been able to change the outcome for that person. I would give anything.
Mhm.
As Ben's mom, anything you asked of me, I would do it. And we did. And we have to understand that we don't have that kind of power. And it's not our fault, right? We get trapped in that blame, shame, guilt. I was really clear that, I mean, first of all, I had this knowing that I had done everything, and there was no reason to feel guilty. And my approach to mental health has always been to try as best I can to equate it to something like a cancer, where we wouldn't feel like, no one would expect that I could cure his cancer or that I had anything to do with when he had it. Can shift that paradigm. That to me really allowed me to move forward and with shame and blame. And if you're in that shame and blame cycle, just know that, like, we see you and we understand why that's happening. And it's okay to let it go. It's okay to know that you did everything you knew how to do, and the system provided whatever support it was able to, which is woefully inadequate. And, your person's mental illness turned out to be terminal. And that's devastating and absolutely life-changing. I was very clear. I will never be the person I was before that phone rang that night with the police calling to tell me Ben had died. I'll never be that person again.
Right.
And that's okay because I can rebuild into something truer, something more honest, something that really honors him and my daughter and me and, everybody. And I can't do any of that if I'm swirling in that shame spiral and that blame spiral and the guilt. So what I would say is find, when I'm working with clients and they're in that guilt spiral, we talk about it being like a whirlpool. It's like a whirlpool on your grief path. And if you can recognize it so that you can walk around it, that's aces. If you can recognize when you're tapping your toe into it and go, oh, I'm actually choosing a different path and make that intentional choice, that's great. If you find yourself in it, you have to find for you what are the branches out of the whirlpool that you can grab onto so you can pull yourself out. Because falling down that whirlpool and continuing the downward spiral, that doesn't honor your loved one. And for me, 100% part of what I'm here to do is figure out how do I honor, Ben, who is gone at 22, way too soon. My dad died in his early 60s. I was only 31. My mom died when I was like 45. Like so many people in my life gone too soon. How do I build this life that honors all of them? None of that has to do with me spiraling in blame, shame, and guilt.
Which is good. And the reason this is important, and I'm a veteran, so I'll just say it again.
Mhm.
Back in 2012, the Department of Veteran Affairs did some statistical research and found that on average, and I guess that's here in America, that 22 veterans die by suicide every day. Now, I'm not going to go
Yeah,
too deep in the woods with that, and that number may be up or down depending on, what sources that we're looking at.
yeah,
It's still a number. It's still a number that should be
yeah,
lower, and at the best, it should be zero, of course. But
yes.
when we're talking about veterans, we're talking about any age, any gender,
Hmm.
any
Hmm.
race, any religion. So it encompasses everything because we're talking about those who have struggled with whatever trauma they've experienced and just couldn't deal with it anymore.
Yeah.
So that leaves moms, dads, brothers, sisters, cousins, uncles, aunts,
Best friends.
sons, daughters, best friends, church
Yeah.
members, co-workers, all of that's the ripple.
Hmm.
You're a mom, and
Hmm.
that is really rather significant because I think parents, because they've seen their child just suffer. You've
Yeah.
seen your son just suffer. What can moms and parents do specifically because they're probably closest to the situation than anyone else
Hmm.
to kind of help them deal with that shame, fear, guilt, frustration? And I'm coming back to these words because they're the first things that hit us.
Hmm.
So please,
Yeah.
as a parent, what can you tell other parents? What's the first couple of steps to get out of that whirlpool that you just talked about?
I think one of the first things is to release the story that our job as parents is to make sure our kids are happy.
Okay.
Parents are older because I just want them to be happy. I just want them to be happy. Yes, that's a very reasonable thing to want for your child. It's not entirely yours to own. And if we can release part of those stories about what parents are supposed to be able to do for our children, right? We're supposed to be able to make sure they're happy. We're supposed to be able to keep them healthy. We're supposed to be able to have them launch, right? We're talking so much about, especially, Ben's generation, my daughter's generation, about how they're like these kids that aren't really launching the way that we expect. Like there's so much pressure put on parents about what we're supposed to be able to control that is absolutely unrealistic and a little bit ridiculous and wildly harmful. Because when you turn out to be unsuccessful in that paradigm because you have a child who dies by suicide, so you failed to keep them happy, you failed to keep them healthy, they probably weren't super well launched if they were really struggling with mental health to the point that it was terminal. Like on all of those false metrics that we put on parents, you have failed.
Mm.
So now, not only is my child dead, I am a failure as a parent. And I'm here to tell you that is absolutely 100% not true. It's a made up false story. What's probably true is that for likely years, you have, as I did, done everything you knew how to do, researching all the things, reaching out to all the experts, going to every emergency room in your community, trying to get support for your child, for your loved one who was struggling. You've probably, in that time, tried all the meds. You've probably tried a variety of different kinds of therapy. So that's one path. You have literally done everything. It's okay if it didn't work. The other path that I think, I can imagine is equally, if not more difficult, is when the first time you realize your loved one had a severe case of mental illness is after they've died by suicide. And I know parents where that's the first time they realized how much their loved one was struggling. And to those parents, I would say, your child, your loved one, protected you from their pain because they loved you and they didn't want you to be in pain also. So ultimately, we are all just human beings doing the best we know how to not cause each other pain. And everything we try, everything we do, we have to be in a space where it's good enough. We are good enough. I was a fantastic parent to Ben, and he still died.
I like that. And I like that you own that. I'm a fantastic parent. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't regret anything because we did everything we could. And we had amazing experiences together and conversations. And because that's the other part I think people don't understand about mental health is I can't speak to his experience, but from the outside, there were many times he was joyful and many times he was happy and many times he was laughing and many times when he was in what we called, because we had to language it for a 10-year-old, the pit.
Mm.
And all of those are part of him. And all of those are beautiful and valuable and worth remembering and carrying forward with us.
Well, I want to thank you for this conversation and I want to thank you for your story, but I want to ask you one more question before we end it.
Mm.
What are you doing now? So recently you've been on the TED stage, the TEDx stage. I need to be
Mhm.
careful with that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
so you're advocating, you're teaching, you're coaching, what else are you doing? What's the message and what's the mission?
Yeah, the mission for me right now is really to shift the paradigm around grief
Okay.
because there's so much silence, there's so much fear. It's very, I think the Venn diagram of grief and mental health is pretty conjoined, because there is so much fear, there's so much lack of understanding. And if we can all get to a place where we can talk about our griefs and our losses, whether they're a catastrophic loss of a child by suicide to a death by suicide, or the loss of a friendship, a relationship, a job opportunity, a pet, another loved one, all the things. There's so much grief all the time. And especially right now when we're living in a time of unprecedented uncertainty and fear, There's a lot of grief around us right now. And if we can talk about it, my mission, my goal is that we would talk about grief and loss as naturally as we talk about what we binge watched on Netflix or whatever, biggest streaming service of your choice. That is that natural a part of our conversation. That how are you is actually a question we ask with an intention to listen to the answer. Because I believe that if we can have those conversations about grief and loss, about our emotions, big, messy, complicated, confusing, those are the conversations that our folks that are struggling with mental health need to be able to have too. And so, from my perspective, my focus really is on grief because that's where I had so much learning about myself, about other people, about how the world operates. And really, the paradigm right now is harmful for everyone. So, I work with grievers because we don't have permission to grieve. We don't have permission to figure it out. We're supposed to be over it in 3 to 5 days, back at work like nothing happened, out in the world like everything's fine. It's ridiculous. And then I work with organizations, with community groups, with whoever will have me come and talk to them. And now through this TEDx talk, which of course is available on TEDx's platform all over the world, to really explain the basics of grief so we have a foundational understanding, which most of us don't have. And then to talk about how can we really show up to support people better. And it really is about on the emotional side, being able to have those open conversations. And on the practical support side, really offering something super specific because the messy grieving brain cannot compute with anything you need, let me know. So that's what I work with grievers to really, leverage my conscious and curious method, which is what I learned very early was this was going to be the two critical, cornerstones of my new foundation was being conscious and curious.
Hmm.
And then how can I create a society where grief is open and acceptable and we understand it better. And so we know how to show up for people because the way we show up for people when we're struggling really makes a big difference.
Agreed. So in the description of this video, I want to tag you, at the very least, the TEDx. So do you have that link?
Yes.
So if they can,
Yes, I can send
okay,
it to you.
okay, please do because if they're watching
Yeah.
this and they want to hear that I want to make it immediately accessible.
Yeah.
And how else can people get in touch with you? So where are you? Is it like a basic website? I want to put that there
Yeah.
just in case so
Yes.
that they can connect with you and you can build that community with them.
Yes,
Cool.
absolutely. I am very grateful that I appear to be the only Suzanne Jabor on any of the socials. So if you can find Suzanne Jabor, you will find me. I'm the only one on LinkedIn. I actually don't have to have a whole weird combination of things after my name anywhere. It's amazing and wonderful. I'm very grateful to my parents. Um, so yeah, SuzanneJabor.com is my website. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. I'm terrible at Instagram. So if you're, you can find me there, but I'm not very good at it and I don't post very regularly. But Facebook and Instagram, I'm there all the time. Really just trying to have this conversation and encourage people to open up and look at what's true. Because if we can all be living a little bit more in what's true and not in all those made up stories, and that feels better.
It sure does.
Yeah.
Well, let me go ahead and thank you and end this conversation, but hang on to the call, okay?
Yes.